Susie Barlow is here. Susie is from a company called The Means, and Susie is running the Earls Court Business Forum, who are sort of linked to the Chamber. Hello, Susie.
Hi everyone.
The Minister is here, Mr. Scully. We're just waiting for Felicity Buchan. Our President, John Stone, is here, and our Chairman, John Cripps, and our Chairman, Michael Stone, is here. If you haven't met them before, Susie.
Hi, no, I don't think I've met anybody before, so thanks, Malcolm, and nice to meet you all.
Welcome.
See you.
Well, so nice to meet everyone. So I'm Michael Stone. I'm Chairman of the Kensington Chelsea Chamber of Commerce. So I'm delighted to welcome you all today to meet Paul Scully and the Minister for London, and also the Minister for Small Business, Consumers and Labour Markets, and also Felicity Buchan, who should be joining us in a second, who's the MP for Kensington. So we'll start off with just kind of a gentle introduction, some opening remarks from the ministers, and then we'll go to questions and answers. So if anybody's got any questions you'd like to ask, either raise your hand, and you can do that at the bottom of the screen by there's an option to raise your hand at the bottom, and then we can see and come to you to ask a question. Alternatively, you can just type a message into the chat box. So there's a chat function at the bottom. If you just type your message into there, then we'll come up with the question to ask Felicity and Paul. So just while we're waiting for Felicity to come on, Paul, whereabouts are you today then?
I'm in Whitehall. I can see the post office tower that way, and St James's Park is just over there. So I come certainly Monday to Thursdays. I'm usually in. So and then I have my policy advisor lives up in Regent's Park. So I tend to walk through West End with her and then double back to where I live near Surbiton. So it just gives me a good idea about what's happening in London. See the volumes of people or not. Clearly, I'm sure that'll be part of the discussion that we have shortly.
Yeah. So my office is in Oxford Circus, and I can see there's a lot more people around at the moment. Everybody seems to be getting ready to reopen, which is going to quite a promising.
Yeah, it's usually Piccadilly Circus or Oxford Circus that I double back from, and so you see the ghost town in first lockdown, and then the second lockdown there still seem to be people hanging around almost waiting for reopening. And now, as you say, there's people busying themselves ready for April the 12th and beyond, which is good.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks for listening.
Yes, hi. Huge apologies that I'm late. I was just on Treasury Select Committee and we were running slightly behind. And of course, they came to me 5 minutes before 3 o'clock. So I was in the chair asking questions. So huge apologies. But I think we're all here, and great to see you all, and great to see Paul. Michael, will you chair the session? Does it make sense for Paul to give some introductory remarks?
Yes, so I think if Paul would like to say some introductory remarks, then we're going to go over to questions after that.
No, thanks very much, Michael. Thanks, Felicity. Thanks, everybody, for joining. It's really good to have the chance to get to speak to you, listen to you, and see what your concerns are. I mean, we're in. Clearly, we just had the 1 year anniversary of since the national restrictions came in. It's been incredibly tough for businesses of all sizes, all sectors. I ran my own small businesses for 25 years before I was elected, and I know the pressures in at the best of times. Never mind extraordinary times like this. It's always, especially for small businesses, business owners tend to spend a lot of time working for their business, and they don't have time to work on their business. They don't have time to think, to look strategically, to make themselves more resilient to these kind of things. And so when you get extraordinary situations like this, it's a huge challenge. And that's why some of you may have heard me say this before. We put £407 billion worth of support into business over the last year. That's 3 times the amount of the NHS budget, the usual NHS budget. And I'm a free market conservative at heart. So I believe in smaller government. I believe in allowing business to crack on, knowing that they're the best people to understand their customer base, footfall, etc. But clearly, we had to wrap our arms around the economy. We had to intervene in that way. But it gives me 407 billion reasons why we need to now shape that recovery and work out where we go to get onto a good flight path, rather than just taking our hands off the wheel because we don't want to. We want to ensure that the jobs that we protected, the livelihoods we protected, stay that way. That we don't just lose the gains that we've made, but through those interventions. So you'd have seen the budget measures. I won't bother going through them now, but we continue to flex. We continue to work to extend a lot of the schemes beyond reopening to, as I say, to get to that sort of flight path. Now, the vaccination programme been a really amazing success so far, and we want to make sure that we're keeping on that. That gives us that alongside the roadmap, alongside the budget, gives us a really good way out of this. But we need to be careful. We need to be cautious. We want to make sure that, as the Prime Minister said, we're sacrificing haste for certainty to give you as much certainty as we can. And I see Sarah on the call, so she's going to pull me up on certainty, because I know that's no, I'm joking. That's because I've been working a lot with Sarah in the wedding sector in particular. That's still my one area of certainty that I'm yet to give you. So it's a bugbear of mine, as I know it is for that sector. But the vaccination program on Saturday, we were vaccinating. We got up to 27 people a second receiving their vaccination. That's a huge amount of work that we're making do. But what we have to remember is that if you have people, people say, why can't you just speed everything up? Everything's going brilliantly. Why don't you just start reopening? If you take just simple maths, it's something like if you have an 80% efficacy of the vaccination, and maybe say an 80% take up, because you can't vaccinate pregnant women, you can't vaccinate people with COVID at this time. You have to wait 28 days, and so not everybody within those vulnerable groups has been able to. They've been offered the vaccine, they haven't been able to take it up, and so that equals something like a third of all of that group still unprotected. And so that's why we've got to remember that figure alongside the possibility of the variants of concerns and what may happen, to manage expectations and to work with you on this this tough time. But in terms of London, I'm doing a lot of work with the Mayor's Office, with the boroughs, with colleagues like Felicity, with business groups and other community groups to make sure that we can get people, especially back into the centre of town. I'm the MP for Sutton, and in Sutton in South West London, what you found, the high streets around London, the outskirts of London, starting to bounce back okay after and I say okay rather than well, in the first lockdown. Whereas the centre of town, the central activity zone, which stretches from Kensington right the way through to through the West End, through the City of London into Canary Wharf, at some points was a ghost town. And there's that fear of public transport, people not returning to their workplaces, international travel, obviously unable to happen in any great numbers, and even domestic travel wasn't really happening. So that and that coupled with students are the four areas that we want to make sure that we can work out how to drive back into cities and town centres across the country. But London has its own issues, and so three phases really at the moment. We're gathering data, we're working through our policies, we're working through those heavily time-lagged interventions, the sort of long comms messages, having a single coherent message between central government, the mayor and local government, the boroughs as well, which can then be amplified by everybody else. If you remember, that was done brilliantly in the first lockdown when we talked about stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. That was driven home to the nth degree. And every time I saw a billboard with a current advert on, it was a business talking about the NHS, talking about the need to stay at home, but please shop online, or whatever it was saying, those kind of things. But it always amplified that central message. We need to do the reverse, explain to people why it's exciting to come back into their capital city. And then that's that the second phase, the reopening, making sure that we're doing it safely, that making sure that we can use local authorities to extend the easements that we had last year to in terms of licenses, street licenses, those kind of things, road closures and the like, and making some of that semi-permanent as well. I remember when I went to Cirencester with my other half when we were able to travel, seeing a guy, there was a coffee shop and there was with no real pavement space outside. So there was a guy who bought a coffee and he went to sit in a seat that they put in a mini roundabout in the middle of a road with a couple of cones around it. That did the job for a couple of weeks, but it's hardly welcoming because so making a semi-permanent structures would be useful, because it's not just about the confidence of coming back into London and into Kensington, it's the joy of coming in. So you can come in time and time again, rather than just go back to what we've been used to for hospitality, sort of like eating takeaways and having a bottle of wine at home. That we wouldn't want to break that cycle and make sure people come back. But there was just a couple of other things that just very, very briefly that that non-COVID related, but really do feed into that plan for growth and that bounce back. It's making sure that we've introduced the successor loan schemes, the recovery loan scheme, but Help to Grow is a really important initiative that we come up with for small businesses in particular, because we want to increase that ability to work on your business as well as for your business, as I started. So we've got the management Help to Grow. So from June, small businesses are going to be able to access a 12-week programme that the government will pay 90% of the costs. So you only have to pay £750, and it's like a mini MBA. It's accredited business schools around the country doing that leadership programme, which I hope will build resilience within small businesses. And Help to Grow digital as well. Clearly, we've seen digitalisation like this, people using Zoom, people using Teams, and more flexible working. We want to make sure that people can small businesses can build on that and have more confidence to go digital. And so we're working from the autumn on a voucher scheme to be able to boost their own online platforms with approved software as well. So all of those sort of things are in the mix, and I'm really, really keen to hear from you as we seek to bounce back and build back better. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Paul. So you mentioned there about encouraging people to kind of come back to work. The official kind of work from home advice, I think that kind of runs out in June. So what can the government do to kind of encourage people to come back to the office and kind of allay the concerns of kind of workers and office workers using public transport safely?
Yeah, no, really good point, and that's back to that city piece that I was talking about at the beginning. So, so the stay-at-home messages ends on Monday, but we're encouraging people to stay local. But as you say, then getting people back to the workplaces in June. But it's not going to be. We want a call to action, but it's not going to be a single. Like, you've got to get back. You've seen the difference in strategies from different companies. Goldman Sachs, for example, said it's an aberration. We want everyone back. BP, I think, are going down to a 2-day week in the office. And Nationwide, you've seen Nationwide Building Society talking, I think it was this morning, saying that we're going to basically say to our workforce, you can work anywhere. What we will do is we're working through business, actually, on a communication strategy that, again, we'll be able to amplify. It works the other way around, but it should be a business-led strategy, but we'll be able to work around that, what London has to offer. And so, do London, come and enjoy London for what it is. So that will work in domestic tourism as well as flexible working. But we need to put out the message to people that working from home is a good thing. Permanent working from home is not a good thing. That's basically living at work. And so the career opportunities that you have from working in your office is really, really helpful. I mean, if you imagine this in a work setting, this kind of call on a work setting, I've likened it to the Truman Show version of real life, because someone curates these kind of meetings. You don't have that informal kind of opportunity to rub shoulders with someone, especially as a young person. So you got someone that in my private office, I see them with their laptops at their end of the bed because they're living with their parents because of the cost of living in London. you don't then get the opportunity to rub shoulders day to day with someone that's been in the business 20 years. So it's reminding people of that. So it's working with big employers, working on that central comms campaign to come into London, because you need to use it or lose it, frankly, as the spirit of London, but also working through that career development opportunities within businesses as well.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, just put your hand up or just type a question into the chat box. So we've got, there's a question from Gary Lashko. Would you like to put your question to Paul?
Yes, thank you. I'm Gary Lashko. I'm Chief Executive of the Royal Hospital Chelsea, and we about sort of 45% of our income is from commercial income, which is all around events and activities on the site and around the site, in participation with our other partners in Chelsea, like the National Army Museum, Chelsea Physic Garden, Cadogan Estates, etc. Now, obviously, COVID's had a big impact on that. We lost, I think, around £3 million over last year because of the lack of events. And in this year, major disruption in that the Chelsea Flower Show has now moved to September, and that's kind of had a lot of other knock-on effects for us. What I'm asking for really is quite a bit, given that so much of London sort of attraction, tourist attraction, related business centres around these kind of larger events, that we can have some real in-depth thinking and clarity about how we're to organise that, what the situation would be if, you know, various sort of restrictions were imposed down the line, and how those things should be policed and marshalled, etc., so that we don't have to sort of make it up as we go along, that we build on best practice, and that we're sure we're in line with what the local authorities and what the police authorities and what the government wants. Because all of that uncertainty and our having to make that up as we go along is actually quite hard to do in a business context. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. And so there's a few areas there to explore. So I'm on a tourism recovery board meeting a little bit later on this afternoon, which has been led by my colleague Nigel Huddleston in DCMS, that looks after events and tourism and hotel, that side of hospitality, because I tend to look after food, beverage, weddings, nightclubs, etc. And that area. And so first of all, in terms of the guidance, we will work with you on the guidance to make sure that that in plenty of time you can see how to, what's to be expected, and we won't expect it to be vastly different from the workplace guidance that was come out before. But in terms of larger events, there's the events research program that is scoping out their methodology at the moment. They're going to be piloting a number of component events. So they're basically taking what is in your kind of events and larger weddings, and they're going to take them apart. And so, you know, whether it's dining, whether it's sitting in big events, whether it's walking around big areas and holding conference, and the transport around it as well, taking each of those component parts, running pilots, and then informing the decisions that will then be taken in May to get onto the bigger events at stage 4 in June. And so I think those will give you the certainty that you want, but then as I say, that will need to be coupled with a good information package. And I should have just said to Michael in terms of return to work, but it will be just as important for the events as well, in terms of giving people confidence on transport. Transport for London have actually done a really incredible job in terms of keeping the tube systems, bus systems clean. What we need to do is show people that, though, because actually they do all their cleaning at night time in the tube network. There's a good case to be made, frankly, just putting someone in a uniform and getting them to wipe some stuff down in rush hour as well, because that's what's actually happening out of hours, but no one sees it. And that's the thing. It's that kind of thing that helps give people confidence to come back.
Thank you.
So, Paul, you mentioned that the Tourism Recovery Board that there is. Presumably, there's going to be restrictions on businesses coming into the UK for an extended period of time. So it's going to be local visitors for UK coming to London over the next few months. But when do you think international visitors will be able to kind of visit freely?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because there's a separate task force that's been dealt with through Department of Transport that's looking at global travel. So that will look at exactly that, about travel in and out of the UK. That also takes in that vaccination passport, the international conversations around vaccination passports as well. Not the vaccination certification that's been debated, and you'd have seen stuff of some speculation in the press after the Prime Minister's story yesterday. But that what you need to do to travel. So I to be fair, I can't speculate particularly. I just don't. I'm not on top of the information as to where they're looking at travel to really start in earnest. And I think the industry itself will talk about the fact that it's going to be some time before the travel sector bounces back to full numbers. But in terms of you guys coming in, I'm really hoping we can get it sooner than later, but I can't really give you any dates. I wouldn't want to speculate.
Okay. Well, then, so also you mentioned the vaccine passport there. So the Prime Minister yesterday was saying that he was encouraging the public to have checks at the entry. So that some sort of vaccine certificate or some sort of vaccine passport. Is that realistic? A realistic option?
Well, it's really something that, as I say, that's been the Cabinet Office are working on rightly on the review of that. First, would it work? How would it work? What are the ethics around it? Is it discriminatory? So they're looking at reasons to do it and also reasons why you shouldn't do it. Because I mean, I gave you the example before about pregnant women, for example, in terms of vaccinations. That means basically about a pregnant woman won't be able to walk into a pub. In that instance, so how do you square that? That's clearly discriminatory in that context. So what else can you do if that was it? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done before you even get to that as out of the blocks.
Okay, thank you. Malcolm Spalding, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Michael. Welcome, Paul, to the Chamber. I've been involved with the Chamber for about 30 years. I have been president and chairman, and currently I'm a councillor in Kensington and Chelsea. And Catherine Fawkes is my lead member there for business. So I don't want to preempt what she's going to say, but two things. The first thing is, of course, tourism is vital to this borough. That's not just hotels and restaurants and pubs, but it's other things like Airbnbs and so on. And the sooner we can get tourists back into RBKC, the better, because this will stimulate all sorts of growth figures and trade and everything else. And then secondly, the minor point, but I think it's more interesting, it would be very good if the banks could do a bit more to support small and start-up businesses with electronic payment methods. If the banks had ready-made packages and could really help small businesses who might struggle otherwise, as soon as they've got an electronic means of receiving payments, we're going to increase the economic growth, the movement of money, your GDP figures. Everything's going to boost the economy. And I think the banks are key to that, helping the small businesses become better at electronic money circulation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. You're absolutely right. I think some banks are better than others at that, clearly. I mean, I don't know about you, I haven't been to a cash point for about 9 months. So everything at the moment is about contactless through to electronic transfers, as you say. And banks clearly, in the same way we've all had to pivot, banks have to do the same. So I meet them on a regular basis. Clearly, a lot of this comes out of Treasury, but from the business angle, I'm certainly pushing that message very much from here as well. In terms of driving people in to use, whether it's hotels or any of the other cultural and hospitality offerings that are in Kensington, you're absolutely right. People don't go to a hotel and stay in a hotel in London just to sleep in another bed. They go in there because there's a theatre nearby, there's restaurants, there's cinemas, there's museums, all of these sort of things. It's all part of an ecosystem, and so that's the big thing that we've got to work on, and which comes out to, actually, Mary's got a question in there about South Kensington museums. After the first, I couldn't tell you what. I'd be interested to know what they are doing. But I went after the first lockdown, went to the British Museum, and it was amazing what they'd done there in terms of just recalibrated their paths through the museum, so you're going in a one-way system there, and just changed around the exhibits to curate a really good experience rather than the free flow that would otherwise be.
Paul, sorry to interrupt you. Dame Mary is actually chair of the Science Museum, so it may actually be good to include Dame Mary in the conversation, and she can give us an update on the Science Museum and the other Exhibition Road museums.
Perfect.
Yeah. I think we go to Mary now.
Great.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Felicity. Thank you, Michael. Very good to meet you and hear from you, Paul. Yes, so the museums in South Kensington and nearby, we call ourselves the Big Six, perhaps slightly self-importantly. That's to say the Science Museum Group, the Natural History Museum, the V&A, Tate, the National Gallery, and the grandfather of us all, the British Museum, have been working very closely together throughout lockdown because we've needed to make common cause to government about the need for support, because we've all lost about half our income, which we generate ourselves through our visitors. But now we are thinking very hard about emerging from lockdown. I've got some terrific new exhibitions. Come to the Science Museum, little advertising break, and you'll see the world's first exhibition on carbon capture and storage, opening when we open on May the 19th. But anyway, in the context of this most interesting discussion, we have been talking to Oliver Dowden, the Secretary of State at DCMS, and others about what we can do to encourage people to come back to London, because of course people come back to London for culture as well as for, well, perhaps more than for anything else. So specifically, we are thinking about two campaigns, one in the spring, that's to say April, May, to promote domestic tourism, mainly from the home counties, so you can have a perfect day out. And then one in the autumn, in the hope of stimulating international tourism, which some of us are very reliant on. For example, in a normal year, if we ever get back to that, the British Museum, 3/4 of their visitors are international tourists. So the spring campaign is backed by two partner organisations, which some of you may well work with, London and Partners and Visit Britain. And we plan basically two campaigns, one called Let's Do London, which is a kind of toolkit. So we'll be doing Let's Do the Museums as part of your perfect day out. But there will also be theatres involved and hotels if you want actually to make a day and a night of it. We have partners in the London Tourism Recovery Board who are also working. The GLA is contributing useful funding for Let's Do London. And then the other spring campaign is called, well, it's an existing campaign, but it's called Escape the Everyday. That's actually for a UK-wide audience, but we'll do a bit for London. We're all putting a bit of money in to get a common and powerful and slick marketing effort using a lot of social media to get people back into London, to give them a great day out. And the Society for London Theatres is already very much thinking about, there's a lot of pent up demand and there's a lot of big productions ready to open. Back to the Future is opening, Life of Pi is opening, quite a number of things are opening. So then from 2022 onwards, of course, the focus for Visit Britain will become international, and we all of us have big international networks. We do a lot of work. We, the Science Museum Group, do a great deal of work in Brazil, Russia, China, India, as well as our European neighbours. So we're very conscious of the role that we can play to support London commercial and business life. And we think it's a great opportunity. And actually, it's the first time, I think, that the museums have worked so closely together, and this is going thoroughly off-piste, but I can see all kinds of back office savings we could make too.
Well, it's the silver linings, Don't Mary, that's brilliant though. That the way you're working on that campaign, that Let's Do London, is I think that's great, because that message, from what I understand, is being driven by you, the cultural sector and the business sector, etc., rather than politicians.
Absolutely.
I'm a poacher turned gamekeeper. As I say, small business owner that's become a politician. I still remain cynical, saying politicians should be nowhere near helping drive footfall back to businesses. You guys know how to do that. You know how to get people into museums and curate those excellent exhibitions and make the Science Museum and the rest absolutely what they are. Because you saw from last year, we had the and I'm frankly cynical about government, my own government. The Enjoy Summer Safely was quite anodyne. The last London Partners thing, that led by City Hall, which was maybe it's because I'm a Londoner. Again, there was no call to action. It's pretty anodyne. Let's Do London actually does what it says on the tin.
It has to be sparky. It has to be really sparky. And for us, the Science Museum, it has to be good for the whole family, because we are the most family friendly of the national museums. Others will have a more kind of grown up experience.
Love it. No, I love it. Looking forward to working with you on that.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Dame Mary. It sounds like a positive message to get visitors back. So the next question from Megan.
So yeah, it's we are
husband-wife team. So Megan, the nurse, that's Renee Aubrey Hairdressing in South Kent.
First of all, thank you for having us in this conversation. There is a couple of things that I want to raise. We are small business owners in South Kensington, 17 years independent, truly independent. 17 years we run the salon. The salon itself has been for 41 in situ. In South Kensington, the same place. The thing is, Mr. Scully obviously mentioned some huge figures regarding obviously the relief that they give into businesses. But what I want to bring to his attention is that this money has been given to us to pay bills. It's not really being given to us to help us in any shape, way, or form. What do I mean by that? For example, all the grants that we've been taking so far has been to pay the landlords or pay debts. We have lost personally about 70% of our income throughout this year. We have been closed for 9 months. For some reason, obviously, we've been deemed, obviously, that we have to close, even though some other businesses around the area, they remained open and they could function. So we're talking about recovery. The difficult part, as we are at the moment, is just, again, we were quite a healthy business. Right now, coming out of this, we are up to our eyeballs in debt that we didn't acquire ourselves, that they've been forced upon us. So how are you really going to help us get ourselves out of this? I mean, we had a conversation with Felicity a month back, regarding certain things to do for the hairdressing industry. Obviously, none of this happened. I mean, like, we're still gonna, nothing happened with corporation tax, nothing happened with business rates, nothing happened with the VAT. I mean, how people expect us to actually open up our doors, employ more people, be productive again as we are. It is practically impossible. I mean, if you think about how we are, how we function with social distancing that we're going to be forced upon us, again, and one thing that I found really it hasn't been thought through by the governments. I mean, like, I have a legal obligation with my landlords. I have a legal document that obliges me to actually pay my rent and be a good tenant or whatever. So you close me by law. I cannot bring any money. Then again, there is no guidance by law to the landlords to be able to say, you know what, we're gonna sit back. You have been closed. You have been closed for almost 9 months. We have to bear some of the burden, but that's not happening. What I've heard so far is, it's not my fault. I'm not the one closing you down. You can still go in. This is not right. You know, you really have to kind of see and help us go back into our feet, because it is going to be carnage after that. Sorry about the big word, but it is going to be carnage. A lot of my colleagues, fellow business owners, are not going to open their doors because they cannot open the doors. I mean, they have accrued so much debt that they don't see a thing. So what I see happening, and that's what I'm trying to say, I mean, recovery is a lot of people will fold their companies. That means a lot of the debt is going to get unpaid. A lot of the money is going to get lost. So instead of giving us money to pay landlords or pay this, you should have given us money to make sure we're going to be open after this, so we can pay back our loans, we can pay back all our obligations and everything else. I really hope this now is going to be taken seriously, because our industry, hairdressing, for whatever reason, obviously, I don't think anyone is taking us seriously. I think is the nature of it, and obviously we had all these names been called and everything else. So I really hope that people will see. We are in South Kensington. We have a small business. Our business rates are exorbitant. I mean,
you
reasonable value. Yes, sorry.
No, I was going to say you have a bit of a perfect storm, because obviously you're a small business based in Kensington, where, as you say, the rateable value is huge. So just throughout central London, that's case in point. And I'll come back to the business rates in a second. But I do take you very seriously. I'm now the minister that has responsibility for the personal care sector as well. So in terms of hair, in terms of beauty, I was really pleased that out of all of the sectors that I'm looking after, that I was trying to work and feed into the roadmap, we were able to get you open first rather than last, as you were last time. So
thank you.
And that wasn't just because of your small businesses. That a number of beauty sector, hair and beauty throughout the country are female-led, who have been particularly badly, harmed by by this. But it's also for the well-being. It comes back to that well-being thing as well. Whilst we can't get the economy open, we can at least have people have little roadmaps along the way and feel better about themselves, as well as helping you on the road to recovery. But in terms of, we've helped also land you the restart grants that are there. Now, although you're able to open, you can still get the restart grant because of the amount of money you're having to spend on PPE and all that, those sort of measures that, again, we weren't able to compensate you with last time you opened for a short time, but at least we can do something now. But in terms of the business rates, we've got a fundamental business rates review that's going through at the moment that we consulted on at the end of last year. There'll be a report on it, an interim report next month, and then a fuller report in October. So it'll take a little bit of time to come through, but that's trying to recalibrate the fact that you have got this ridiculous situation with such a high rateable value for such a small business, so massive fixed cost. We want to make sure that it's ready for the 21st century, frankly, balance between online and...
Exactly. It is 50% of our rent, 50% of our
rent. Exactly. And you talked about rent, just finally, you talked about rent. It's a really difficult situation to try and square. So we've extended the rent moratorium so that you can't be evicted because of you can't have a statutory. Well, you can't be evicted, but we're also looking at the stuff that I put through last year, that you can't have statutory demands and winding up petitions because of COVID-related debt. But we also need recognise that landlords have a business too, and they can't keep going on fresh air. So we need to work out how we have the conversations sensible conversations to be able to actually get you that the flight path that I was talking about at the beginning, rather than just suddenly, right, you're open on the 12th, April the 12th, April the 13th, I want a massive rent check from you, please. That's not sensible, but that is anecdotally, that's some of the conversations that are being had. We want to make sure it's far smoother for both of you.
I had my rent demand, which I actually have to pay today. Don't even ask me how I managed to scramble with the money. I had my rent demand. The list is as such that they say words like bankruptcy has been thrown at me and this and that and the other. I have been an impeccable tenant for 17 years. I have never missed a payment. I mean, like, actually, I haven't never missed a payment on anything. So I just find this very, very unfair. Anyway,
it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating, and it may help what Ken's just put in the chat as well. I think the underlying thing with all of this, when I talked about wrapping your arms around the economy, it's as harsh as it is to hear. It's not all of the stuff that we put in is not a compensation scheme. It's a protection scheme. So we've been trying to protect jobs, protect livelihoods. Clearly, we're not going to be able to compensate you for every bit that you've lost on it. That's COVID. That's the pandemic. It's one of those unforeseen circumstances that you get in business. But this is just a massive unforeseen circumstance that's never been happened before. But we'll try and work on the plan for growth to help you recover.
I understand all of the above. I just thought that it would be a little bit better if we just kind of share a little bit the burden between both parties, you know. I mean, like, we have to do the right thing. Again, I'm not going to be sitting here criticizing the government, screaming. Sometimes I've been a little bit more heated. But fundamentally, what I want is I love London. I've been here since '96. It's my home. It is the most fantastic city in the world. I don't want to lose London. I don't want to lose the museums, the bars, the restaurants, everything. It is the most vibrant and intelligent city. So I really hope everybody's going to reopen the doors, and then we can have a nice environment again so we can live.
Absolutely, well said. Michael, do we want to take in Ken? I know that he's been texting on the chat box.
Yes, so Ken, do you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah, hi Minister and everybody. I'm Ken, I'm the Chief Exec for HR Owen in Kensington. We have 2 showrooms in Kensington, but we have other showrooms all over London, especially in Mayfair. I think for UK, the furlough scheme is very impressive. We don't find it in many places in the world. Where I'm from, Malaysia, we don't have this support system. The rates holiday is fantastic, but we just hope that it can be extended, because the business recovery is not just going to come back the second we open our doors in a few months. It's going to take a while. I read in the news that corporate tax is going to increase in 2023. I just feel that it's just too soon. Everything is not going to go back to its norm in 3 months or so. It's going to take a while, because everybody is sitting on a lot of debt, because we've been paying rent and rates and to support our staff, and try not to get staff retrenched as much as possible. So we just hope that government has a pathway to help the recovery part, to encourage us to continue to invest into UK. I think this year alone, we have invested close to 50 million. We are opening the new Rolls-Royce showroom in a few months in London, in central London. So we are still positive about London in the long term. We just need a very clear pathway, a very clear direction, because if we don't have a clear direction, we can't tell our customers from all over the world when we can have driving events in the summer. Every time we are posed with the question, we say we don't know, just continue to watch the telly. It's not going to be helpful if we don't really know a specific date where we can bring people back into London. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and the uncertainty is the killer here. If we can get more clarity from the government, it will be helpful.
Shall we bring in Paul? Just one thing, Paul, if we can maybe make our answers quite snappy, because I see 4 people have got questions.
People, yeah. I mean,
yeah, and I'm conscious of time, yes.
And I think I've covered a good amount of that, because I think the roadmap gives about as much certainty as we can give, and that was the roadmap, the budget, and then the common strategy to get people back into London. That's about as best we can do in terms of that certainty and the support for business.
Okay, thank you.
That's good feedback.
Can we come next to Catherine Fawkes, please?
Hi, Paul. You very kindly sent me a letter the other day because I was bringing up issues about business rates and the VAT tax for the businesses in Kensington and Chelsea. So I'm very much looking forward to this review that you mentioned. I don't know who was consulted on it, but it is really urgently needed for the businesses, because that's the thing I hear most of all. We've all been saying the same thing, but I won't really repeat it. We know Central London is going to be the hardest hit business sector, not just in this country, but in the whole world. The tourists aren't really expected back until 23 onwards. If we're lucky, 2025 is what London and partners predict will be maybe back to how we are. And in Kensington and Chelsea, we have twice as many visitors in the borough than we do residents every day. We double the population, so we're totally reliant on them, but we are very vulnerable, as we've heard from some of the businesses here. So I appreciate what you're doing on business rates. I think that's really important. I appreciate the Welcome Back Fund that you've just announced to us. I think that's great. I do think Central London is being disproportionately not having money handed out to us, as is done on this formula of £20 per head for grants and things. And obviously, as we know, our businesses have far higher expenses than businesses in Wales. It's £20 per head per resident, which is what the calculation of how much we're given for our discretionary grants, which hasn't really worked it out. It means we've got the 4th lowest amount per business in the country, and yet we've got the businesses with the highest amount they have to spend. So we can take this offline, but there's a lot to do. But just to say, as a council, we agree it's all about creating safe spaces, attractive places, local visitors from outside the borough. And just to doing that, we're doing an arts festival for 3 months from July the 21st. We're very much in conversation with all the museums, events happening on Exhibition Road. There's a big event happening on the Earls Court site. We've got events happening all over the borough. And we're going to make the borough green and pretty and hope that people will come back and shop. But we realise it will only be local people for the next year or so, and our hospitality sector is on its knees. So just to beg to you, Paul, to keep the government focused on London. And we know the levelling up agenda is very important, but at the moment it's keeping your London money just existing would be great. Thank you.
Definitely. Look, London levelling up is not mutually exclusive from looking after London, because we've got to level up within London, frankly, as well. So, and you know that more than most boroughs, actually, the disparities within Kensington. So, just one point I'll pick up on is the additional restrictions grant, the ARG. So, there's 2 grants going forward. The Restart grant that I was talking about for hospitality, leisure, retail, and personal care and gyms. But also there's the additional restrictions grant, which we're topping up. The top up is actually going to be based, the allocation is going to be based on per business. Finally, it's taken a while, but I finally got that through on the last, what I say for the last grant. That one will be far more suitable for KNC and for the other inner London boroughs. So I hope that's helpful. But we're asking you to get it out quicker as a result of that top up, but also to look at it, see if you can spread that a little bit more to some of those businesses that have fallen between the cracks, that haven't otherwise been able to get those discretionary grants.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Susie Barlow.
Hi, yes, I forgot to take my hand down again, and I think mine's probably been covered, but just to make the point really quickly, going back to the Let's Do London and the London and Partners campaign, I'm just interested to sort of open the question of how do we, as a kind of business forum in Earls Court, get involved with that, and in particular focusing on hotels. As Councillor Fawkes has just said, Kensington and Chelsea's a borough that relies quite heavily on our tourist industry. And if people come to the hotels displaced from other locations in the UK that are fully booked, like Cornwall, I think was mentioned, you know, if people come to stay in hotels, then other businesses as a knock-on effect will benefit from that. Hairdressers, corner shops, restaurants.
Absolutely. In 10 minutes time, I'm off to the Tourism Recovery Board, so I'll hopefully have an answer for you after that season.
Sounds good.
But we do want to plug in everybody, because it's all about that, amplifying that message and making sure we're connecting properly.
Yeah. So there are lots of restaurants in Kensington, Chelsea as well. So let's come to Marco Molino.
Hello, I'm new to this, so I assume everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to say that we do appreciate and we're very grateful for any sort of grants and tax breaks that we have received so far. So thanks for that. Just a quick point, which could be a brilliant idea, which would involve many restaurants. We're talking about the museums and especially being so many in a small area in South Kensington. Would there be a possibility to do some kind of collaboration? Maybe this question probably directed more towards Mary. If we could do some kind of collaboration with the cinemas, with the museums, where if a family was to make a trip to come to London, obviously they would want to visit the museum and they'd want to have lunch somewhere. So would it be possible to do a collaboration with the museum? Because we know that when the museums do reopen, the queue is going to be very long. Would there be a possibility for, if a family has lunch in a restaurant in the vicinity, to get like what they call a fast track pass or they also call it a queue jump pass to gain access immediately into the museum without having to wait possibly an hour outside? That would be great for the museums, because it would arouse more interest from families who are probably a bit worried about the lengthy queues, and it would be great for all the restaurants because we could issue a fast track pass where there would be guaranteed no waiting outside the venue. Would that be something that the collaboration could be done with restaurants in the vicinity of the museums?
I'm sure that, I don't know if you guys want to have a conversation about that, but certainly, see, this is what I mean about businesses getting involved in this rather than politicians. Is great.
Also,
showing a bit of creativity.
I think there's a sort of a queue jump pass or fast track entry would help a lot of families who maybe they have to take the train home, and if they have to queue up for an hour outside the museum, that would be an hour missed for the children to see the exhibition. Also, just one thing I'd like to mention, which I'm very disappointed about, is I know that the government have spent a lot of money, and Sadiq Khan has lost a lot of money by cancelling the congestion charge last year, and their main aim, the government and the Sadiq Khan main aim seems to be recoup my losses. You know, where I've seen many headlines in the newspaper saying the government needs to be paid back, and Sadiq Khan needs to be paid back. This is why he's extending the emission zone and so forth. Now, I do agree and I do appreciate the grants that I've received, but if I calculate my losses and ask my customers to give me that money back, I would be charging £1,000 for a pizza. And it's completely impossible. Now, isn't this something that should be just taken on the chin and move forward and move on, instead of making everybody suffer because the government wants their money back?
Marco, I'm just conscious of time. Why don't we let Paul come in on the congestion charge, and then we can take the final question, because Paul absolutely needs to jump.
Yeah, and I think I think it's important to separate the two, because the congestion charge is solely the responsibility of the Mayor of London. It's not the government getting its money back. It's about making sure that Transport for London can keep the transport moving.
Yes.
But we've always said, as government, because we're clearly having to use taxpayers' money to to bail out the transport system, and that's fair enough because, you know, obviously there are hardly anyone on the tube, hardly anyone on the bus network. That's clearly going to be a case, but we will cover the cost of COVID. We're not going to cover the cost of Sadiq Khan and his policies. That's for him to remain accountable for. And obviously there's an election. I don't want to get political about it. There's an election coming up, which you can have your voice made at that point. But we'll clearly cover the cost to make sure that the tubes don't stop, the buses don't stop. But I agree that the congestion charge is something that we don't need to be extending. We don't need to be increasing the cost of extending into the evenings and the weekends, because that really does have a huge effect on hospitality and cultural sector in particular.
Right, thank you, Paul. Marco. Crystal.
Yes, thank you. I'll try and make this very quick. So I represent Fit for Life Youth, which is a not-for-profit organisation, and we tend to operate in Kensington and Chelsea. I guess the main question here is, my role is a funding and partnerships coordinator. If there's going to be any opportunities for supporting, which is our primary segment, young children, as we know, they've obviously returned back to school, and usually there can be summer projects coming up. Just wanted to see what opportunities there were for further grants, so we can hopefully mobilise ourselves back into getting continuous business.
Well, it's an important point, Crystal, that you raised at the end, because it's not just all about we can just look at the economy and the numbers, but forget the social fabric of London, which the economy plays and the businesses within play a massive role in. But we've got to look at the well-being, as I was talking about earlier, and children especially so. So we're trying to do more in terms of engagement outside school times, with holiday clubs, with other issues like that. Your specific example, if it's grants you're looking at, that's dealt with by another with some of my colleagues. So I'll certainly take that away and see what more we can do, maybe through Felicity, to look at that. But we are keen to make sure that whether it's City Hall, the boroughs or national government, that we're fully joined up to give our children that very best start.
Thank
Crystal, why don't you and I follow up and we can see if there are any grants that you are eligible for.
Brilliant. Thank you, Felicity.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone. So as we've got about 1 minute to go, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Paul for your participation today. It's great to hear what you were saying. And thank you very much to Felicity as well for joining us. And I was going to say to Marco, maybe we can put you in touch with Dame Mary, and you can maybe organise something for the restaurant and maybe with the Science Museum, so we'll put you in touch afterwards.
And Dame Mary, I'll pass on that news about the carbon capture exhibition. I'll pass that on to my colleague Anne-Marie Trevelyan, the Minister for Energy Minister, who I know will be incredibly interested in that area.
Okay. And thank you to everyone else for participating. Thank you very much, Ken Chu from HRO, and it's great to hear the investment that's going on in Kensington, Chelsea and London. And Danny, Lidgate Butchers, thank you very much for your supporting us. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, guys. See you all.
Thanks.